Well, thank you so much for being here and for your time. And I very much appreciate the fact that you're here to help me share some of the points about this beautiful country that I am very, very fond of. And I'm sure that you will be too once we finish this chat. So I know that we're going to have a lot of questions in the Q&A, so we're going to jump right in right now. Cuba. How to travel there legally as a US citizen. Okay, a little bit about myself, Talek Nantes. I'm a former international business professional. I've visited about 110 countries, decades of travel to Cuba. I'm Cuban American, born in the USA. And on the right, you'll see all of my social media information. I'm also, yes.
Talek, are you trying to share your screen right now? Because we just see your beautiful face.
Oh, yes, I was. Thank you.
It's at the bottom. Share
Okay,
screen.
now we
Oh,
got
perfect.
it. Sorry.
Okay. I don't think that's your presentation.
No, this is my presentation here. Can you see
Oh,
that?
Perfect.
Okay, here we go. Sorry, guys. We're all set now.
Great.
Okay, a little bit of information about me. You've already heard over here on the right side, you've got all of my social media information. 110 countries and counting. I've been traveling to Cuba since I was born, and I am Cuban American. And I'm also the author of Travel to Cuba. It's an Amazon best-selling book available on Amazon right now. It's the ultimate Cuba travel guide. What makes Cuba special? It's many things, primarily the architecture. It's the vibrant music scene, legendary nightlife, the natural beauty, and the warm and friendly people. One of the most important aspects of it is the architecture. Here are a couple of examples. The cathedral is on the bottom, and over on the right side is an arabesque design, which is incongruous, not something that you see frequently in Cuba. And over here on the left, you have the inside of the Capitol building. On the right is a yacht club. But I think people that are familiar with Cuba would agree that the most important aspect of it is the natural beauty. This here is the Valley of Viñales, where my family is from. And it is one of the most spectacular sights that you'll ever see. Little known facts about Cuba: it's got 9 UNESCO World Heritage sites, 10 national parks, hundreds of protected nature areas, and just miles and miles of beautiful coastline. You'll find among the many Cuban beauties, the smallest bird on earth, and also a very aggressive Cuban crocodile that can leap 6 feet into the air to catch prey. And some beautiful sunsets. This one on the lower right is of Cienfuegos. Who can visit Cuba? Anyone, post-COVID, of course. But for US citizens, it's a little different. You cannot travel to Cuba for tourism. That is 100% prohibited, but you can travel under one of 12 government-approved categories. Support for the Cuban people is the one that most people choose, and this is on the honor system. You self-declare that the reason why you are going to Cuba is for support for the Cuban people, and then you comply with these requirements, and we'll see what some of them are. Very important point is that the United States government puts out a list of Cuban government entities that US citizens are prohibited from patronizing. These include most of the high-end hotels and mid-range hotels as well. So you might ask yourself, well, where do I go if I can't stay at these hotels, which are Cuban government owned, and therefore prohibited? And we'll see the answer to that shortly. Requirements for support for the Cuban people are not onerous at all. They are things that you would do ordinarily. So where do you stay? You stay at what they call a casa particular, which means private home. And these are like Airbnb situations or homestay situations where there's usually a woman that runs these, that rents out rooms in her home, or might have some apartments that they rent out to visitors. That's where you stay. It's a great experience because you're interacting with the homeowners who are Cubans, and you are supporting Cuban private enterprise by staying there. Where do you eat? You eat at places called paladares, which are nothing more than restaurants that are independently owned by Cuban entrepreneurs. Also, it's required that you meet and interact with the local artists, musicians, farmers, tour guides. These are people that you would interact with ordinarily. And all of this, it fulfills the requirement of support for the Cuban people. And according to the US government, these relationships, quote, enhance contact with the Cuban people, support civil society, and promote the Cuban people's independence from Cuban authorities. Also, you can shop at independent markets, take classes such as salsa dancing and cooking, go to independent museums, go to art galleries. These are things that you would do ordinarily. So traveling to Cuba under the support for the Cuban people requirement is not a difficult thing to do. There are many entrepreneurial organizations such as this one, which is a printing shop, which is run by women entrepreneurs who create and print these beautiful designs for sale to the local tourists. And by visiting these places and interacting with them and hopefully purchasing some of their items, you are again supporting private enterprise in Cuba and complying with the US government requirements of support for the Cuban people. How to enter Cuba? There are many airlines that fly directly into Cuba, among them American Airlines, JetBlue, Southwest. Just recently, United Airlines was given the opportunity to enter the Cuban market. And there are also more airlines traveling to more cities, more Cuban cities, not just Havana. So now they're going to Camagüey, Cienfuegos, and all the way to the other side of the island, which is Santiago, Cuba's second city. So it's easy to get there. And a flight out of Miami is an average cost of about $330. Today, things change. They also fly direct out of New York City, and many other places. You need to enter Cuba with what some people refer to as a Cuban visa. Other people call it a Cuban tourist card. I call it a tourist card. And these you can purchase online, or you can purchase it from the airline when you are ready to board your flight to Cuba. So the airlines will sell this. You cannot get into Cuba without this. This is an example of what it looks like. It has the same information on both sides. Very simple information: what's your name, date of birth, your passport, and your country of nationality. It's the same information on both sides. The cost is anywhere from $50 to $100, depending on what airline you purchase it from, or if you buy it online, who you're purchasing it from. Once you are on the flight, you will be given a customs declaration to fill out. Very simple questions. And these are the same documents that you're accustomed to seeing. A customs declaration: what are you bringing in? Are you bringing more than $10,000? Are you bringing in animal products, any food, and so forth? Just fill that out. There's no issue with that. You will also be given a health certificate. This will ask you if you have COVID, if you are feeling COVID symptoms. Have you been with anyone that has had COVID in the last 14 days? Just fill that out, no problem. At passport control, once you get off the plane and go into the airport, passport control will take half of your Cuban visa or tourist card. You must hand in the other half once you leave the country. Do not lose that, because that could be a big bureaucratic issue. So just hold on to it. Money matters. This is very important. Cuba's currency is the peso. Hard currencies like the US dollar and the euro are also widely accepted. Now, credit cards drawn on US banks will not work in Cuba. Neither will ATMs connected to US banks. So US citizens must bring enough cash with them to last for the entire trip. Now, if you are on a tour, your accommodations, all of your transportations, and most of your meals and your activities will be paid for, so you don't have to carry a lot of cash with you. If you're going independently, and many people do, and you can, and that's fine, you are going to have to keep enough currency with you to last you the entire trip. Which can be uncomfortable, but it's still doable. And you can exchange your currencies at exchange houses that they call carecas, or the local banks. You need to have your passport with you when you're making those exchanges. And keep in mind that the peso currency changes, exchange rates change frequently, so it's important to check frequently. Also, it's best to keep small currency with you, small dollars or euros with you, so that you can, small denominations, so that if you were paying for something, you're going with dollars, $20, for example, you will get your change back in pesos. You don't want to get stuck with these pesos because you really can't trade them anywhere. You can't really exchange them. They're worthless on the international market. So they're only good in Cuba. So you don't want to get stuck with those once you leave. So make sure that you have as little of those as you possibly can. Most places, especially in tourist areas, will accept hard currency, so don't worry about that. Where to stay? We talked about casa particular, or casa for short. This is one example of a casa. This is a lady that manages her own business. She has a home and she rents out rooms to visitors, to the tourists. She functions as a concierge, for example, like she will make reservations for you, dinner reservations. She'll find taxis for you. She will book a casa for you in the next city. She wants to make sure that you are very comfortable and very happy there, so that you will recommend her home, her business, once you return to your country. And I think that the most delightful part of this experience is that you are having an authentic experience. You're interacting with the local people, sitting in their living rooms, watching television, playing with their pets, talking to their kids, and just having some very interesting interchanges about what life is like for the average Cuban. And you can make very good friends with them. For example, I went to her daughter's graduation. Her name is Teresa, a lovely person. You see what her home looks like? That's in Trinidad. This is a typical, maybe not typical, but this is a casa in Havana. They have the terraces where you have breakfast, and you can see the rooms are clean and orderly, and they all have their own private bathroom, a air conditioner, a safe, refrigerator, mini fridge, and a television set. And this particular casa is set in a beautiful plaza. It's called Plaza Vieja, in the center of Old Havana. And it is a delightful place at night, and even during the day. It's filled with musicians and has restaurants and coffee shops and breweries all on the periphery. It's a lovely place and a very nice place to stay once you're in Havana. This is a casa in another city in Santiago. So just to give you an idea of what they look like. Now, in the upper left-hand side, you will see that there is a symbol that is the national symbol for a casa. So if you're looking for a place to stay, if you see, wherever you see this sign, you can knock on the door and say that you want to rent a room there, and how much is it, and you can take it from there. In the center of the slide, you'll see a typical Cuban breakfast at a casa, and most of these are included. Breakfast tends to be included when you have a casa. You'll see that they've got a lot of fresh fruit, eggs, fried plantains, tomatoes, great coffee, and also fruit juices are very popular. What to eat when you're in Cuba? The typical Cuban dishes have all the proteins. The sides tend to be black beans and fried plantains. Cakes and pastries are very common. Cubans have a big sweet tooth. Tropical fruits are available at just everywhere. The best places to eat are the paladares, which we mentioned are a private enterprise restaurants run by the local Cubans. And eating there, as well as staying in a casa, again, complies with support for the Cuban people. Some recommended paladares in Havana are La Guarida, which is famous because a famous Cuban movie was filmed there. El Cocinero, which is inside a fabulous art and music venue, which is called the Cuban Art Factory. And San Cristobal is the restaurant where Obama ate in when he was in Cuba. All guaranteed to be good places. What to pack for Cuba? Comfortable walking shoes, loose, comfortable clothing, consumer products. You will not find these in Cuba, so bring your own. That includes sunscreen, tissues, feminine care products, Imodium, insect repellent. It's a good idea to create your own little first aid kit and stuff it with all these products that I mention here. Also, donations are always welcome, and good donations that you can bring and leave in different entrepreneurial places or schools, or even with local churches, or even with your casa hostess. These would include aspirin, pen, pencils, used clothing. Used clothing is used for many things besides just wearing. Crayons, soaps, and things that you think people would need. How to get around Cuba? The classic American cars are a fantastic way to get around the city and to take tours. They're convertibles and make for fabulous photo opportunities. You can travel around the beautiful plazas with horse-drawn carriages. There are taxis, but most of these are government run and they tend to be a little bit more expensive. And also in the center of Havana, you have what they call BC taxis, which are bicycles that have been transformed into little taxis. You can see that in the bottom right-hand shot. The ideal itinerary for Cuba would be to start in Havana, go to Vinales and the Bay of Pigs, which is a beautiful beach area, then Cienfuegos, which we saw has beautiful architecture, Trinidad, Matanzas, and finally ending in Varadero, which is one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. What you'll get in Havana is the nightlife and the art scene. This is a group fooling around in front of the Cuban Art Factory, which I mentioned is an art and music venue. The UNESCO World Heritage sites, that's the center of Havana, which is called Old Havana. The entire section there, the entire part of the city is a UNESCO World Heritage site with fabulous architecture. Havana is full of museums. It has some great rooftop bars, eastern beaches nearby, and it's a wonderful opportunity to meet artists and converse with and interact with the Cuban people, which again complies with the support for the Cuban people category. Vinales is the beautiful tobacco country, which unfortunately was very hard hit by the Hurricane Ian. It's a great opportunity to explore a typical Cuban town and to enjoy delicious farm-to-table meals with spectacular views, great for hiking and biking, and just seeing something besides a Cuban city. Trinidad is another UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it is the most perfectly preserved colonial town in the Americas. Has some great outdoor nightclubs because it's very, very touristy. And it's surrounded by wonderful local rivers and forests, which are great for hiking. Cienfuegos, which is about an hour away from Trinidad in central Cuba, It was founded, it's the only Cuban city that was founded by the French from Bordeaux and Louisiana, and you can see the French influence all over the city. You can also visit what is believed to be the most beautiful plaza in Cuba. And I agree, it's just spectacular architecture and surrounded by wonderful waterfalls and waterholes that you can swim and hike in. The last point here is Matanzas, which is the home of the Bayamar Caves, which is a network of caves that are 300,000 years old, and you can take a tour inside the caves. Next to it is Varadero, which is arguably the most beautiful beach in the world. And I would agree with that. It is spectacular. People ask me, is Cuba safe? Yes, it is. But like any other developing country, it's just a matter of using your, being prudent and just using common sense. Don't flash your valuables. Separate, keep your money in separate sections, count your change carefully. Anything that you would do anywhere from New York City to some obscure village. But it is one of the safest places in Latin America. And tourists are guarded very, very well. My company does do tours, and if you're interested, you can go to Travels with Talek, but I won't focus on that because I'd rather save time for Q&A. Besides my book, Travel to Cuba, Experience Cuba, the Ultimate Cuba Travel Guide, I've written the Cuban Exile Memories, which celebrates the experiences of Cubans that fled communism and came to the United States in search of freedom. Also available on Amazon. Lastly, there is my book, 110 Best Travel Tips. And you can get this book for free when you subscribe to Travels with Talek. Here you will find some excellent tips on how to save money both before and during your travels, staying safe, and a lot of no-nonsense tips on the best way to travel and how to maximize your travel experience. So I hope that you'll subscribe and that you'll get your free book and hopefully visit Cuba in the future. And thank you so much for your time, and I'll open it up to any questions.
Awesome, Talek. That was amazing. Thank you so much. If everyone wants to join me in the chat for a virtual round of applause, that was a great presentation. I've always wanted to go
Thank you.
So very cool. I have accumulated some questions here, and I'm going to try to keep going in the chat box with them as they pop up. So if anyone else has any questions, feel free to drop those in the question box as well. And I will be following up with those, but we can go ahead and get started with the Q&A if you're ready for that, Talek.
Sure.
Okay, great. So the first question that we had was, I heard that there are different currencies for local Cubans and tourists. Is that accurate?
That is a very good question. That was the case up until about a year ago. For 30 years, Cuba had a dual currency system. One was the national currency, the peso, that we have discussed and we've seen pictures of it. The other one was something called the CUC, or convertible dollars, convertible pesos, or CUC for short, CUC. That has been eliminated, so that headache is now gone. So, but that's a good question.
That is a very interesting question. The next question is, are most hostels or hotels there run by the government, or are they mostly privately owned by the locals?
Wow, these are great questions. I'm so glad you've asked that. Most of the hotels, the mid-range and high-end hotels, are owned by the Cuban government, and the US government puts out a list of which these are. You can find that in my presentation, or by going to the US State Department and looking website and looking specifically for Cuba. You can see that there's probably hundreds of different places that the United States government says you should not patronize because they are run and owned by the Cuban government. So if you can't go there, what do? You go to these casas that are the private enterprise Cuban businesses. and you can stay there, like the Airbnbs and homestays. They also have hostels, and some of these Cubans run their own hostels. That the Cuban government doesn't get involved in these that I've just mentioned, the casas or the hostels. You can stay at a hostel. The average price, not average, but a low ball price is $11 a night, $10 to $11 a night. You can also stay at a casa that's very high end in some of the nicest neighborhoods in Havana, and those can go for hundreds of dollars a night. Now, these are just spectacular mansions with gardens and with swimming pools, and so, and those are also casas. Those are also privately owned. But the average is the regular casa that you saw with Teresa in Trinidad. Those are all owned by Cubans, and those are the ones that the U.S. government encourages you to stay at, but stay away from the high-end hotels.
Interesting. Great information there. And then how do you find casas particulares in Cuba, and any websites you would recommend for seeking those out?
Homestay is one, Airbnb is another. What I would recommend is that you, if you're going to Cuba, is that you book your first night or your first city from the United States using those websites. And also there are several others. I don't remember the name of them, but they're on my website. Or you can just go to, casas, best casas in Cuba on the internet, on Google, and you'll find it. You can stay at those, and let's see, I'm trying to figure out, those would be the best ways to find it. My recommendation is that you go to the first night with a booking from the United States. And once you're there, you can just walk around the city and you'll see the signs. Wherever you see that sign that looks like an upside down anchor, just knock on the door and say you're looking for a room and how much is it? And if you don't like the price, you just go next door to the next one. Now, once you're in the first city, you can also ask your casa lady, your casa hostess, to find you or to book you a casa in your next city. And that's usually she usually charges a fee for that, but it's nominal. It's like $3, $3 to $5. And if you want to do that, you want that peace of mind that once you get to the next city, you're going to have a place to stay. You may want to do that. That may be worth your while.
Very cool. So our next question is there any way to open travel around Cuba for like 10 days or 2 weeks without a plan, going day by day spontaneously while still respecting the laws? Is that something that's—
Yes, of course. I've done that. Yes, absolutely. You can do that. You can travel. There's a bus company called Via Azul. You can take that, and you can that'll take you from one city to the next. You can also, at your casa, you can ask your casa hostess to book you a taxi to take you from one city to the next. Once you're there, what you're staying at a casa, so you're complying with the support for the Cuban people, you're eating at Paladares, so you're complying with there, and then you're doing all of these other things that you would do ordinarily, like taking a taxi, or working with a tour guide, or going to an art gallery, or seeing a music venue. All of these things are support for the Cuban people. So yes, it's entirely possible to do that on your own.
That's amazing. Okay, so our next question.
But a caveat here, you need to carry your cash with you throughout your stay. All of the cash that you're going to need for your stay. So you're going to have to pay for your room, you're going to have to pay for your food, your transportation, none of which is very expensive. But if you're going to be there for 10 days, let's say it's going to cost you $100, $120 a day, all inclusive, you're carrying around a lot of money. So that's something to consider.
Absolutely, something important to keep in mind. Our next question is there's a lot of folks actually in the chat who are hoping to see that ideal itinerary again. I think that you are still screen sharing. If possible, could you go back to that slide so maybe people could snap a picture of it or take a screenshot of that ideal itinerary?
Okay, not a
People are really
problem.
interested in that. Thank you. All right, so there it is, everyone in the chat. If you want to just grab a screenshot of that or take a picture with your phone, so you can take a look at that. And then I will follow up about sharing the presentation, because I know everyone's really interested in seeing this info again. So our next question, is it safe to rent a car and travel from Havana to Santiago, or in
I
general on the
would
island?
not recommend that. I would not recommend that. I'm sure it's safe, but it is just cumbersome. You don't know, the streets are not well marked, the roads are not well marked. If the car breaks down in the middle of the road, you don't know when you're ever going to get a replacement. It's just
Sure.
not, they're not there yet. They're not there. I would
Sure.
not recommend it.
Okay. Are people with security clearances able to visit?
I don't know the answer to that.
Interesting. If traveling to Cuba and then booking your tour, would that be considered helping the Cuban people?
Absolutely. Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes. Are you saying booking my tours or booking a tour in Cuba? Either one is
I
considered.
think that they're referring to your tour.
Okay, yes, mine are 100% compliant with the US regulations.
Wonderful.
But you can also book it on your own in Cuba with a tour guide, and make sure that it is not a Cuban-run tour agency, which is on the list of the prohibited entities that the US government puts out. Some of these are called
Sure.
Gaviota, that's the name of the organization. The other one is Cuba Tour. There are several of them. We're not allowed to use those. So just go with your local Cuban guide, which you can find them on TripAdvisor or any number of places. And
Wonderful.
your casa hostess can also recommend good tour guides.
That's wonderful. Okay, so this one is about the hurricane. Have you heard how Vinales is doing since the hurricane?
Yes, I spoke this morning to my contacts in Cuba. Havana fared remarkably well. Things are back to normal. They still have some power outages, but they tend to have that regularly, so that's no surprise. Vinales was hit very, very badly. The tobacco crop was damaged severely. However, the water has receded entirely, and the restaurants are actually open again, and the main street is operational, and you can still go hiking and rent a bike and ride around. And there is an underground cave network there that you can actually sail on this underground river. That's functioning. So it's not that it's a country town, and a lot of palm trees were downed, but it really is not a place that suffered construction falling. It's a country town with a lot of nature around it, which is comes back, recuperates quickly from these disasters. Remember, Cuba has been experiencing hurricanes since day one. They know what to do. They know how to come back from it. So to answer your question, yes, Vinales was hit very, very hard, especially the tobacco crop, which is the most important crop, one of the most important exports that Cuba has. But they will be ready for visitors in the season, and the season begins November.
That's great to hear. Are there any national parks in Cuba that are ideal for hiking or sightseeing?
Yes, there are so many of them. Boy, there's so many national parks. There are 10 major official national parks. The biggest one, I believe it's the biggest one, it's just spectacular, is the Alexander Humboldt National Park, which is in near Santiago, which is Cuba's second city, all the way on the other side of the island on the east side. And yeah, there's great hiking there, but there's great hiking in not only the national parks, but all of the nature reserves A nature reserve is a teaching school for scientists and for students and people that are studying the plants and the animals and so forth. They call it these nature reserves. There's plenty of those. And there's a lot of just regular protected areas that you're not allowed to build in, and you can go hiking on all of them as well. I have on my website a section that talks about all of the national parks and all of the preserves and how to get there and what activities are there. So if you're interested, just go to Travels with Talek and look up the national parks, Cuba national parks.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That sounds like such an amazing time. This one is an interesting one. Is there any issue with visiting the government sites and buildings and just not spending money there, or are we not allowed on those sites?
Well, let me tell you, like, nobody's really paying attention. Nobody's really watching. The Cubans don't care where you go. They just want tourists. And the Americans, there's no representative from the State Department that's going to follow you around to make sure that you go in, or did you spend more than 5 minutes at the beach? That's, nobody cares. All of this is the honor system. It is, however, illegal to spend money at these places. You can go in. You're just technically not allowed to spend money. Now, do you go in and maybe go to the Hotel Nacional, which is a spectacular place, a historic hotel in Havana, which is on the prohibited list, and buy a beer there and sit and look at sit by the pool? And I mean, I'm sure that you can do that. You just can't go and spend time there and stay there and eat at their restaurants and sleep in their rooms. Again, you could, nobody's watching, but it is illegal according to the US. So to answer your question, you can walk into these places and you can see them, and many of them are absolutely spectacular, such as the Hotel Nacional that I've just mentioned. It's historic. You just can't really spend a lot of money there, obviously.
Makes sense. Okay, so this is art about kind of history. Are there a lot of places in Cuba to learn about Cold War history?
Yes. Oh boy. There is a museum. There's so many of them that come to mind. I just had this like a wave of information came into my brain. The presidential palace has the Museum of the Revolution that gives all of the history from the Cuban perspective. So that's a must visit for the historical aspects and just to learn, just to get that perspective. It's just very interesting. And it's a beautiful building. So that's one example. Another example is the Bay of Pigs, which is one of the places that I mentioned in my ideal itinerary. It's a beautiful beach area. And there is a little museum there, much smaller than the Museum of the Revolution in Havana. So you can learn about it there as well. In the Hotel Nacional that I just mentioned, that you can actually go in just as long as you don't spend money there, there is an underground bunker that talks about the revolution as well. So there is ample opportunity to learn about it, the historical aspects, but the Museum of the Revolution in Havana is the best place to go and should be on anybody's list.
Fascinating. That sounds like such a cool experience. All right. So our next question is, you said that the nicest casas go for hundreds per night. Is that in pesos or dollars?
No, that's dollars.
Dollars. Okay, perfect. And then do a lot of people speak English there?
A lot of people in the tourism industry speaks English. The tour guides, of course, speak English. I mean, you can go to a bar and order a mojito. Does everybody know what a mojito is? It's the Cuban national drink, a mojito or a daiquiri, and they'll understand. Everybody, a lot of the casa ladies do speak not only English. I mean, Teresa, the lady that I showed you that I stayed in a hotel, she gets by with Italian and French as well. So you're not going to suffer from a lack of communication. And then everything in context. If you're eating, you can point at something, and you guys know what to do. I mean, if you're travelers, you've been in situations where you've communicated with hand signals and yeah, you're not going to have any problem. The further away you get from the tourist areas of places like Havana and like Trinidad, the less English is spoken.
Makes sense. And how's the internet access throughout?
It's very poor. It's spotty at best. It's unreliable. You are best recommendation that I can give you is to tell your family like you're not going to be in as much contact as you ordinarily would.
Yeah.
What you do in Cuba is that you'll buy what they call an Atexa card. It's a little card with a code on it, and you'll go to a place where there is Wi-Fi. Most hotels have Wi-Fi. Most parks also have Wi-Fi. You sit there, put your code in. The card costs you $1 for an hour. You can also get them in increments of $5 for 5 hours. You'll sit there and you'll connect, and that's it. But you cannot just go anywhere and turn on the get on the internet easily. So.
And then
Just-
this was another question that kind of ties in, so I'll just throw it in there with that one. Is there any kind of reception for US cell phone networks? Like, will your cell phone work at all when you're there in any way, shape, or form?
It's spotty. I believe that AT&T does have some connection there, but what I have heard from those that have even attempted it, that it is expensive and that it is spotty.
Interesting. Yeah, I would assume that. I wouldn't expect probably your cell phone to work super well when you're there, but certainly opportunities to check in every now and again with family and friends. So this person is a dual citizen, American and Mexican. Is it easier to travel as an American or a Mexican citizen? And does it matter where I fly from, USA or Mexico? I heard it was easier to go as a Mexican citizen. Any insight on this is appreciated.
Yes, it's easier to go as a, it depends on what you mean by easy. I mean, yeah, a Mexican citizen can go and she can use her cards, all of her credit cards, and she can get money out of the ATMs. That's really and go anywhere and stay at any hotel that they want. And you can spend 2 weeks at the lounging by a beach in Varadero or in the Hotel Nacional in Havana, and no issues with that whatsoever. I find it easy for US citizens because I like staying in these private homes. I enjoy that authentic experience, and I like staying at eating at the Paladares. I think that the food is better. I don't have any problems as an American, but is it easier? Yes, you don't have to carry wads of money. It's as if you're going to another city. It is easier as a Mexican citizen.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And then what happens, or what are your options if you realize that you did not bring enough money? What do you do?
Wow. That's a very good question. You used to be that you can get money through Western Union. I'm not sure if that's still if that is still the case. So I don't know the answer to this. I've never been in that situation, and I've always told people just make sure that you bring enough. Just make sure that you bring enough. Just plan for it. Just don't take the risk.
Yeah,
But perhaps see beforehand if Western Union still operates in Cuba.
Yeah, just bring more than you think you'll need, I think is a good answer to that. Have your accommodations kind of booked and then bring a little extra just in case.
Right. And there are things that you might want to splurge on. For example, there is a fabulous Vegas style floor show at a place called the Tropicana, which is just very beautiful. It's open air and the shows are great. And that's $100 a night, including dinner. That might seem expensive to some, but compared to a Vegas floor show where it's like $500 for the same thing, it's very reasonably priced, and the shows are very good. So you might want to spend on that. A lot of other people like to buy original art, and that's a wonderful place to get art that has been very highly rated. So bring the money that you want, that you think that you might be interested in spending on.
Great advice. Are there volunteer English or teaching opportunities, like teaching English abroad opportunities, and would this satisfy the U.S. support requirement?
I don't know if there are opportunities. I'm sure that I usually deal with people that want to learn Spanish. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure what the process would be. But I'm sure that it would be something that's enormously welcome. I bet you that there are. I'm going to look into that. That's a very good question for
Well,
teaching English.
we will try to follow up with that because that is an interesting question. And I'm sure if it's not an opportunity right now, probably it will be as this whole thing sort of plays out. What about the weird stuff happening to US government officials at Cuban hotels? Have you heard of this? The high-pitched audio that caused headaches.
Yes, I've heard about that. It's called the Havana syndrome. It has occurred not only in Havana, but in other cities as well. And I just saw a documentary on it the other day. And a lot of people studied it and interviewed many people that were suffering from it. And they came to the conclusion that they do not know where it comes from or how it affects people, or if it even has anything to do with Cuba. It's just that that's where they first noticed it, where it first occurred. So they just referred to it as the Havana syndrome. But it's even common in other places as well, even non-communist places like Austria, Vienna.
Okay, thank you so much. We've had a few other questions come in here on the chat. So I am going to just try to catch up with those here. Bear with me for 1 second. How much what would you say would be the ideal budget per day? The ideal enough, like to have enough money, what would you say a good daily budget would be?
If you're going on your own, $100 to $120, $130 a day.
Okay.
If you're going with a tour where your hotel, your casa is paid for, all of your transportation is paid for, your admission fees for the activities, all of your breakfast, most of your other meals, then maybe $30 to $50 a day.
Perfect.
And you will come home with a lot of that left over.
What about getting health care if you become sick while traveling in Cuba?
Well, that is, healthcare is mandatory to go into Cuba. And when you purchase your airline ticket, your health insurance in Cuba is already included. I think it's like $25, but whatever, it's included. So you do have healthcare in Cuba, whether you want it or not. So if anything happens to you there, you will be taken care of by the local Cuban hospitals and doctors. My recommendation, in addition to that, is to always, no matter where you go, be it Cuba or be it, New Jersey, get health insurance.
Yeah.
Just get health insurance. Just do not go anywhere without that.
And then what national currency do you recommend bringing?
Dollars.
Dollars. Okay, perfect.
Euros also are accepted. I'd say dollars definitely.
Absolutely. If you are carrying large sums of money,
US dollars. There's a lot of different dollars.
US dollars. If you're carrying large sums of money, what is the chance of being robbed when locals would know that US citizens are carrying a lot of cash? Do you put your cash in multiple locations when moving to a new area?
I put mine in the safes, and every casa has a safe, and the safes work fine. And I don't carry a lot of cash with me anyway. I go with small group tours where everything is prepaid, but I'll put my cash there. I'll put my passport in there. So I keep it in a safe. You're safe in a casa. You're safe there. These are just very protected. Anything that's tourist related in Cuba, since it is such an absolutely crucial form of hard currency. Everything that's related to tourism is protected. You are watched over by plainclothes policemen, I mean, you'll notice it in all the tourist areas. All of these casas are vetted. They wouldn't be in business if they even had a whiff of improprieties. So you are safe there, and your money is safe in that safe.
Thank you so much. So one final question. This question is, so we need to bring donations. Where would we leave them? Where do you leave the donations?
You don't need to bring them. They are encouraged and greatly appreciated. You can leave them either with your casa hostess. You can leave it at local schools. You can ask your casa hostess, where is the local school, and go and donate there if you're bringing pens and pencils and things like that. A lot of these entrepreneurial places that are, many of them that are run by women, that we saw in the presentation, there's a printing shop, you can leave it there. There's another donation site that we go to, entrepreneurial site, that these are women that take clothing, donated clothing, and they make things out of them. That you can leave things there as well. Churches, any church will be more than happy to take it. So those are all those typical places. There are old folks' homes, just many places, and you can find out through your casa hostess.
Wonderful. If anyone else has any follow-up questions, or they feel like I maybe accidentally skipped their question in the chat, please feel free to drop that now. I'll give it just a few minutes and see if anyone else has anything pop up. Okay, we're looking good. That was so wonderful, Talek, and I appreciate it so much. Again, everyone join me in, oh wait, I think I just got one more. Was there a discussion about the currency? Yes, so the currency is pesos in Cuba, I think is what you said, Talek, but you can bring US dollars and exchange that there.
Or you can also use your US dollars to pay for things.
And then, is there a best and worst time to travel to Cuba?
The best time to travel is out of the hurricane season. So the best time to travel is from November to November to May or June, November to June.
Wonderful. And then, is there a penalty to exchange dollars?
Not anymore. There used to be. Good question. That was eliminated about 4 years ago. Used to be a 10% fee. They used to call it a service fee. That no longer exists.
I have a follow-up question here about the money, and that is that she knows that your money will be safe when you're at the casa, but what about when you're moving to a new location? What do you do to ensure the safety of the cash that you're carrying?
I wear a money belt.
Yeah, I do.
I wear a money belt, and I wrap the cash in a saran wrap, because you will sweat a lot in Cuba, and that'll go through the money belt. You can also get waterproof money belts, but I just wrap the cash. I use the waterproof money belt, and I also wrap the cash in saran wrap. You can get those for $14 on Amazon.
This question is it hard to get the approval to travel where you help the Cuban people? Like, are there a lot of people that get denied, or is that a difficult process to get that approval?
For approval for what? For support for the Cuban people? No,
Yeah.
Anybody can go. It's self designating. You just say, I am going under the support for the Cuban people. Anybody that asks you, that's where you're going, and it's automatically approved, and it's your honor system. So it's assumed that you're going to do all of these things that I've mentioned that comply with support for the Cuban people. But again, nobody's watching. So
So
It's-
instead, you would never say tourism when you're going to
No,
Cuba.
my God, no.
Why are you
Absolutely not.
traveling here? You don't want to say tourism. You
Never.
are saying that you're going to help the Cuban people.
Support for the Cuban people is the official designation, the official category, support for the Cuban people. There is a section on your customs form which you get on the plane that asks you why you're going there. Do not put tourism down. Yeah.
Right.
Never. That's like the single biggest no-no.
And then do you have to report your trip to the US government?
No, you do not. It is recommended that you hold on to any kind of receipts for 5 years. Nobody's ever going to ask you for this. So if you want to, that's fine. If you go with a tour group, they'll do that for you. But I'm not aware of anybody ever being asked to present this.
Great.
So they want to make sure that you did not, assuming anybody called you on it, they just want to make sure that you didn't spend all this time in some fancy hotel drinking margaritas on the beach.
Exactly. Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. That was a lot of great info. I know a lot of you had questions about will the presentation be sent to your email? I believe that it will once the Nomadic Network kind of goes through and edits off the beginning and the end when we were having some technical difficulties. So you should receive that. That was a great, Talek, I don't know if you can see the chat box at the bottom here, but everyone is saying thank you so much.
Yes, I can see
wonderful.
that. Thank you.
So wonderful. And if everyone wants to stick around for a second, I'm going to share the screen again and just do a little follow-up for some of this upcoming stuff with TNN. And thank you so much. That was great. I really want to go. I'm sure everyone in the chat does as well.
Thank you.
Bear with me for just a sec. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. Alrighty. And then so these are just a few of the things coming up with the Nomadic Network. On October 6th, we have Grow Your Business on Autopilot, the power of the email list. On October 11th, transferable points, the best way to use credit card rewards for travel. And then on October 18th, we have a virtual event that allows you to connect with other travelers over 60. There are also some great upcoming meetups. If you are interested in attending an in-person meetup, they're so much fun. Check out the nomadicnetwork.com/events and you can see if there's one happening in your city or nearby. I love these. I go every month, and our next one in Cincinnati, we are going to Blink, which is a really cool light festival. So it's a great way to make new friends. And then on October 25th, we have this lovely book club where everyone reads the book and then meets up to discuss. And in October, it is the Catch Me If You Can, One Woman's Journey to Every Country in the World. Additionally, there are some seriously amazing group tours happening this year. If you are interested in an experience like that, definitely go to the website, thenomadicnetwork.com. They have limited spots available and they book up quick. There's some very cool destinations this year. So definitely check that out if you're at all interested in joining a group tour. And then thank you all so much yet again for joining us. I do apologize. We had some technical difficulties in the beginning, but it was so lovely meeting all of you. And I am going to go ahead and say goodbye.